What's up, everybody? It's your favorite show, Get a Bucket. I'm your host, Trey, and as usual, I hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day. Now, today we got to talk about a very bittersweet topic, which is Chris Paul's retirement. Because honestly, growing up, Chris Paul was one of my favorite players to actually watch the game of basketball. Okay, and well, it starts off. I got to just give off my little spiel. So Chris Paul's story isn't quite about size, right? It's not even about rings. And let's not be disrespectful, right? That's not a jab, okay? We just speaking facts, right? It's about love. It's about loss. And it's about control. Now, we're going to go back to before the NBA, before the All-Star games, before the debates, right? Even before college. There was a kid from Winston-Salem who saw the game of basketball differently. And at West Forsyth High School, Chris Paul wasn't just talented, he was actually surgical. He understood pace, angles, timing, but the moment that defined him didn't show up on a recruiting ranking. During his senior year, his grandfather, his best friend, was murdered. The next game, you would think that, your heart's heavy. Maybe you might not even play that game. His grandfather died at the age of 61. Chris Paul scores 61 points. One for every year his grandfather lived. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's spectacular. And when he got to the free throw line for the number 62, he intentionally missed. That wasn't about basketball. That was about heart. He stayed home and chose Wake Forest University. No super teams. No blue blood spotlight, just belief. And at Wake Forest, you could see it forming. The commanding, the leadership, the way older players listened to him. He wasn't overwhelmingly physical. He wasn't overwhelmingly mentally. 2 years later, he declared for the draft. He went 4th overall and was selected by the New Orleans Hornets, where everything about that organization changed. From day one, he controlled the game like a veteran. Rookie of the year, and by year 3, he was second in MVP voting. Standing at 6 foot tall, which, to be clear, I went to a basketball camp called Next Level, and Chris Paul was actually there. And he told every kid there about how he really got measured in height, and that was to stand basically as straight up as it could be. And for that to be measured as 6 foot says that he's really shorter than 6 feet, ladies and gentlemen. You don't play the game basketball standing straight up, right? So again, listed as 6 feet, but was realistically shorter. And we got to remember too, the NBA is a league of giants. Like, even back then, it was a league of giants, right? Like, the average height in the NBA is 6'6". Was 6'6". I got to double check nowadays. Again, like I said, he was at most 6 feet tall. And what stood out for Chris Paul was he was the smartest man on the floor. Bare minimum, most nights. Now, he didn't just put up numbers. He gave New Orleans hope. Then came Lob City, another place that needed hope. You got to remember, with the Los Angeles Clippers, CP3 turned a forgotten franchise into must-watch television. Shout out to his teammates as well, right? But we got to recognize CP3 was the engine to this train. The lobs were loud. The highlights were everywhere. But here's what people forget. He built up that culture. Accountability, preparation, precision. Still no finals. Again, that's not a jab. We just stating facts. And that became the cloud that followed him, unfortunately. At least the finals part. Accountability, preparation, and precision, that also followed him. And you got to respect that. Then he went to Houston. With the Houston Rockets, he was one hamstring away, one game away from taking down a dynasty and reaching the finals. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. He would have helped James Harden beat the unbeatable Golden State Warriors. We're talking about, like, That would have cemented his legacy. That would have helped cement his legacy. That injury in 2018, that's one of the biggest what-ifs in modern NBA history. A bigger one is what happened if David Stern did not nix that CP3 trade that would have sent him to my Lakers. But, we here now. But after that Houston trade, right, he was then traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder, where we all thought it was over, right? We thought he was about going to be hanging it up, which, to be clear, CP3 at one point in time did say he would like to retire by the age of 31 to spend time with his family. So I figured, okay, we starting to inch towards that narrative that CP3 spoke. We thought he was aging out. Instead, he helped carry that young OKC team to the playoffs and remind everyone leadership doesn't decline the way athleticism does. And in fact, his imprint should be talked more about with OKC's current dynasty. But that's another discussion for another day. Because after OKC, he ends up going to Phoenix, where the Phoenix Suns hadn't made a playoff in decades. Or I guess in a decade. They had been to the playoffs before, right? But 1 year with Chris Paul, the Phoenix Suns go to the NBA Finals. Y'all can bring up the 2021 season. Injuries occurred, whatever you want to. He goes to the finals and almost won the NBA Finals. 16 years into his career, he finally stepped onto that final stage, and that matters. Here's the truth about Chris Paul, ladies and gentlemen. He may not have the championship ring, but everywhere he went, teams did get better. Young guards matured, franchises stabilized, standards rose, butts were put in seats. He mastered the mid-range in a three-point era. He defended bigger players with pride. He turned the pick and roll into a science. And throughout all of it, he carried something deeper than competition. He carried purpose. You got to remember, too, he was the president of the Basketball Association, ladies and gentlemen, so he was highly revered amongst his peers, no matter the fact that we talk about him negatively, saying, oh, well, his leadership style we question. Well, people still wanted him to be a leader for the players. So clearly it couldn't have been that bad. From that 61-point tribute in high school to becoming one of the greatest pure point guards this league has ever seen and witnessed. When we talk about floor generals, about what it means to run a team, to steady a locker room, to close games with poise, Chris Paul's name will always be in that conversation. Not because he was the biggest, not because he was the flashiest, but because he understood something most players never fully grasp. Basketball isn't just about scoring. It's not just about getting a bucket, ladies and gentlemen. It's about responsibility. And from Winston-Salem to Wake Forest to the NBA Finals, Chris Paul didn't just play the point guard position. He honored it. Now, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Paul is easily one of my favorite players to have put eyes on. And like y'all heard me say, I was very hurt when I found out that Chris Paul Lakers trade got nixed. Because I genuinely do believe that Chris Paul's legacy would have changed, as well as Kobe's, in terms of being viewed as a champion. We would be talking about Chris Paul so much differently. Similarly to other players, how we talk about Charles Barkley, one of the greatest players in NBA history. He did not win a ring, so people try to shortchange his career. And sometimes that does irritate me. I'm not going to lie to you. And I feel like I'm going to have the same gripe with Chris Paul. Again, I heard Chris Paul speak to kids, including myself, trying to encourage them on how to be better NBA players or how to be better players in general. You saw the impact Chris Paul had when he was on each team. Again, going up against my Lakers while on the Hornets, where his best player was David West, and that's not a slight. That's just stating facts. His second best player was David West. And going up against my Lakers when we had Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom and Andrew Bynum and Shannon Brown and Jordan Farmer, we had a really deep squad, ladies and gentlemen. Trevor Ariza, the Ron Artest. he would push us to a game 6. And sometimes I would have reservations on if we're going to win that series or not. So again, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Paul, not the biggest person on the floor, not the flashiest person. While he did show some flash, he also showed you too, it is about the basics. And I hate the fact that the end of his career went the way it did. I wish the stint on the Spurs would have been a little bit better. I wish the stint with the Clippers would have been a little bit better. I thought the Raptors actually could have used Chris Paul, especially with his tutelage. I hate the fact that how he got ushered out of the NBA. But you got to remember the years in which he stayed there. So again, from hearing that he wanted to retire by the age of 31 to spend time with his kids, we were about 9 years off. But now he gets to spend time with his kids and family and gets to live his life. So I'm very happy that we got to witness Chris Paul, the basketball player. And I'm very curious who Chris Paul, the man, actually is. Basing it on the basketball court, top-notch individual. And the game of basketball will genuinely miss you, sir. But ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I had to give a tribute to my guy, Chris Paul, because he's one of my favorite players to watch of all time. Whether you're talking about on-court production, intangibles, he's called point guard for a reason. So CP3, thank you for giving us years, no decades worth of entertainment. And hopefully you get a chance to enjoy the game yourself as a spectator. But ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that does conclude my tribute for Chris Paul. Like I said, one of my favorite players to watch of all time. So where does he rank for you all in terms of players that you've actually watched? If you have a favorite Chris Paul moment, I'd love to hear it. Comment below. But ladies and gentlemen, like I said, that does end the episode. So please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and tell anyone who's anyone about the show. And CP3, if you're listening, I genuinely do appreciate you, sir. Thank you. As a basketball head, I genuinely appreciate you, the individual, and your family. But ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the end of the episode. So hope you all enjoyed it. And like I said, y'all heard me. Like, subscribe, comment, tell anyone who's anyone about the show. My name is Trey. I'm the host of Get a Bucket. I hope you are all having a good one. Take care.